Buonasera a tutti, buonasera, benvenuti alla Fondazione Sandretto e Rebaudengo. Darei subito un grande, caloroso, speciale benvenuto a Beatrix Ruf, che da novembre, tra altre cose, è anche la direttrice dello Stedelijk Museum di Amsterdam e che quindi questa sera ci racconterà qualcosa di questo fantastico museo, ma che è stata fino a poco fa anche la direttrice del museo di Zurigo, e infatti questa mostra che inaugura questa sera è una collaborazione tra queste due istituzioni ed è ovviamente una mostra curata da Beatrix Ruf. La mostra che fra poco andremo a vedere è una mostra di pittura presentata appunto a Zurigo, finita a Zurigo pochi giorni fa, il 25 gennaio, e la cui artista, questa giovane artista che si chiama Avery Singer, che vedete qui, l'artista nata nel 1987, quindi è davvero giovane, ma è già molto apprezzata, ha già fatto mostre importanti, anzi così cogliamo l'occasione per dire che sera che il 23 di febbraio al New Museum ci saranno delle sue opere, due grandi lavori all'interno di questa mostra della triennale che il New Museum di New York organizza appunto in 3 anni. Questa sera non c'è solo questa mostra, adesso fra poco Beatrix e Avery parleranno del lavoro di Avery, parleranno dell'importante ruolo che ha Beatrix al museo in Olanda, ma questa sera abbiamo anche un'altra mostra che è molto importante e noi siamo davvero più felici di avere con noi Massimo Minini. Massimo Minini, tutti lo conosciamo, è un gallerista importante, poco per dire, un gallerista che ha più di 40 anni di storia alla sua galleria, un uomo che ha saputo davvero dar tanto e far tanto per l'arte contemporanea del nostro paese, non solo attraverso la sua galleria a Brescia, ma attraverso tutto quello che ha fatto e realizzato, e soprattutto per questa sua energia, questa sua passione che lo contraddistingue davvero. E nella sua lunga esperienza, devo dire, vicino a lui c'è la sua moglie, che è stata altrettanto importante e ha trasmesso anche questo, perché anche le due figlie hanno una galleria, quindi come si può trasmettere una passione per un mondo così bello come quello dell'arte. Oltre alla mostra che vedete curata da Massimo, queste saranno delle fotografie, vedrete, bellissime, fatte da fotografi importantissimi a degli artisti ancora più importanti, ma oltre a ciò vedrete anche una piccola parte di questi 20.000 inviti che Massimo ha ricevuto nella sua vita da tutte le gallerie del mondo e che sono qui, ne ha portati, sono tante belle caffe, ma soprattutto da questi oggetti incredibili che raccontano la storia dell'arte contemporanea degli ultimi 40 anni. Ecco, questi oggetti verranno studiati, infatti oggi con noi Salvo Pitotti, che è il direttore dell'Accademia Albertina di Torino, e che da questi oggetti nasceranno 2 tesi di laurea con l'Accademia, e quindi, come dire, anche una bellissima occasione che questo bel materiale che ci ha messo a disposizione Massimo serve per collaborare con l'Accademia, vedremo poi i risultati appunto di queste 2 tesi. Cos'altro? Ecco, ancora Massimo sarà di nuovo qui a Torino il 3 di marzo e dialogherà, perché poi sono molti libri, vedrete nel bookshop quante cose belle Massimo ha portato, e il 3 di marzo alle 18:30 saremo di nuovo qui in Fondazione insieme a Massimo, insieme a Francesco Bonami, insieme a Gianluigi Recuperati, per parlare appunto di questa sua avventura, dei suoi libri e di quello che è l'arte contemporanea. Oltre a queste 2 mostre, stasera inauguriamo una terza mostra. Questa mostra parte da opere della collezione, si intitola Fobofilia, una mostra curata da Irene Calderoni, la nostra curatrice, che all'interno della collezione ha pensato di riunire, perché il bello delle collezioni è proprio questo, e stasera credo ne avrete un esempio, che una collezione si può leggere in tantissimi modi, ci sono tante strade, tante aperture, e Irene ha pensato appunto poi ci racconterà, magari racconti un po' di questa mostra. Io colgo anche l'occasione per ringraziare Irene Calderoni per l'importante lavoro che svolge in Fondazione, per la sua professionalità, e insieme a Irene ovviamente ringrazio tutti i miei collaboratori, anche perché quest'anno è un anno importante, compiamo 20 anni e queste sono le prime 3 mostre che inauguriamo di questo anno, che sarà ricco di eventi, ricco di tante occasioni per vedere mostre bellissime. Non vi sto a raccontare qui il programma perché poi lascio la parola a loro, però sarà un programma davvero importante, ricco di mostre diverse, variegate, pittura, scultura, fotografia, vedrete cose incredibili.
Buonasera and grazie mille Patrizia. It was a great pleasure to bring this show from Zurich to Torino. It's the Avery Singer shows was the last show I actually curated and also installed for the Kunsthalle in Zurich. It was a great pleasure to be able to come back to this experience, and I'm wondering if at the Stedelijk Museum I will have the great pleasure to work so closely with artists in the future, but I'm sure I will fight for that. Thank you very much also, Irene, for working together, and of course the whole technical team who installed the show. I also wanted to thank Massimo Minini, who during the installation shared many stories about artists he had worked with, and we had some really great insight in what that means. The picture you see there is one of Avery Singer's paintings. You will see 11? 13,
yeah, I think
11 paintings in the show. When I first saw Avery Singer's paintings in Berlin, I actually did not know what I'm looking at. I thought, what really is that? Is that painting? Is that a print? What is that technique? So I think for everyone who encounters those paintings, probably the question is, what are we looking at? And I wanted to ask Avery first to tell us what we are looking at in terms of technique, maybe.
I guess you're essentially looking at a form of obsessive compulsive tape painting. Acrylic on canvas. Sorry. Yeah, it's acrylic on canvas, and the images, the sketches are derived from like the digital realm.
We work with like many artists. I know you use this freeware program called SketchUp. It's like how do we have to, envision that? How you do this? What's your process?
I mean, I guess the kernel of an idea can kind of begin anywhere. So I've never really been the kind of artist where I'm like producing like actual sketches. So I've always kind of done them on the computer. So for me, like, the most exciting and easiest way to do this was to work with this freeware because it was really accessible and democratic, and I don't know, I just saw something in it, so I started producing. I started producing essentially these like figurative scenarios, and then I translated them into drawing and then into paintings.
I wonder, I think we should talk about this technique a bit more, because when you look at your painting, when I look at your paintings, I see a totally flat surface. When you spent a lot of time in making it look as flat as possible, but you also use and you evoke three-dimensionality, illusionism, which in a way seems to come from a totally different time. We know that you work very much from the digital realm, and we all share this experience of looking at screens every day, at mobile phones. Everything is kind of transmitted and flat. So I was wondering why you are interested also in this illusion of the double illusion of the flatness.
So I guess the answer is sort of that, I mean, for me it's like working on the computer is just such a natural thing to do, and I was making these drawings a few years ago, and I realized that the way that I was making them was problematic, and then it was like, so how do I produce work from the computer that isn't problematic? And I realized that, I hadn't seen paintings that were like utilizing this kind of space, like this kind of pictorial space, and so that sort of became the impetus to like embarking on this body of work, like in this.
I still want to go back to the technique. I don't know if I forgot if you mentioned it, but you use airbrush, and it's a very hands-on technique then you have to apply on the surface of the canvas to, you know, to make the brush work and to tape all those things that to create the lines and to play with the shading of the non-color. And there are two things again I want to ask and know more about is why are you so, you know, so sincerely working on that flatness, and why is there no color?
I mean, I developed this work on paper, and I had no real intention of becoming a painter, so becoming a painter kind of happened to me. So I had to, in order to produce the kind of images that I had like invented, I needed to figure out a way to work on canvas. So I realized I needed to, you know, essentially render the canvas paper smooth, or, you know, the application of the paint will actually pick up the texture like of the fabric. So I was trying to avoid that. I mean, I don't know, in a way it's like when I think about it, the entering painting was about I think an attitude of avoiding many things, so like color or something, and brushes and like other things that I'd seen. So, and then I realized that I guess I innately had the sense that I had no propensity for color, and it served the image as no purpose to begin to utilize it, because it did nothing to actually allow you to like visualize the space of the painting, so it was unnecessary. And if it's unnecessary, like why try to like draw it out of me, you know?
Why, you know, where did you come from so that painting happened to you? What did you do before?
I mean, I made like I was making these drawings, but then before that I had been in school just sort of experimenting with everything except painting. So I never painted in school. I started doing it after.
There is, of course, one recognizes things in your painting. There is scenes. There's people. There's like human figures. Kind of human figures. There's movement, there's the evocation of activity, and often it happens inside what is depicted or what is recognizable is things that happen in the studio or that refer to art history, like one of the paintings in the show, to a performance Victor Conchi did once. So why is that, you know, how do you come and why do you come to this thematical elements of your work?
So the artist kind of begins, I guess I was thinking like what are scenarios that like I haven't seen in painting? So I thought, oh, I haven't seen, you know, like, because like painting is, for me, it's like something that historicizes what you insert into it. So I thought, okay, if I could, you know, position like the attitudes of like a current, you know, studio visit or something, and people are obviously uncomfortable and sitting there and, you know, the art is bad or something. So that's sort of like where the art, like the artists kind of came out of. But I mean, Gertie McDowell's playbook, which I don't know if we have an image of. I mean, the inspiration really comes from like all over the place. Like with that, you know, I was obviously thinking of Vito Conchi, but I was also thinking of Ulysses, and there was this moment in the text where the form and the content had this modern relationship to each other, and to me that was like really fascinating, and I really saw it as like a metaphor for like the way artists work. And so I kind of wanted to embed that idea in the painting and like reference that like specific moment in the text and the title. But yeah, I mean, I guess in a way like each work kind of has its own starting point, and they can be totally different from each other.
I find it very interesting that you say that that painting in general historizes everything we see, or when we see, historizing what we see there. And this, of course, in a way connects to your use of black and white, and all the shades from black to white, which is also kind of a distancing from realism, of course. And the versions of realism we know. And I was wondering, what you often evoke movement in your paintings, and as well with the actual figures acting in it, but also with the illusion of shadows moving in time. Can you talk a bit more about terms like illusionism versus realism, maybe, and even constructivism, which of course is evoked by the constructed forms of the figures in your paintings.
To better answer your question, can I ask you to clarify or explain what the movement?
That was good after 5 minutes.
Sorry, what you mean by movement?
I mean, when one looks at your paintings, there's when one starts to depict, there's the movement evoked. People are moving, almost like in futurism, things are being staggered in, and as if you look at painting like a scene in time, and you have a shadow running through. So there's you mentioned film also once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I was curious as to what you meant by movement, because movement is like a problem for me. Like, I can't really figure out how to depict movement. Like, I think they're completely still. They're essentially these digital still lives that I set up for myself and make paintings of. And I don't know if you would see it that way too.
Maybe I wanted to move more in the direction to ask you about illusionism and imagination, which obviously is at stake when you have again the reduction in color, but also the illusion of an actual scene. And I wonder what your interest is really in that. One could say, I mean, when we did the show in Zurich, I got some text messages and also some Facebook. It's like, is Kostabi back? And so you get this. You get these references, of course, where you can ask, is there an intentional use of style, which you then transform into an anti-style?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've been trying to figure out if the paintings themselves are like mocking their own form through their own like dumb simplicity, and I think, there's a degree of that. But I don't know how else to answer your question.
And we have spoken several times about it also in terms of what really happens in facing reality where artists are working much directly out of the digital, which I find, of course, not only it is the abstract world. There is no physicality directly, and I always wonder how these translations into the real world from artists happen, and Avery chose painting, and it is full of questions. What that digital experience of the digital abstract means towards the reality of the physical world. And of course, I also could ask, why don't you do sculpture, you know, where you already evoke three-dimensional forms in your paintings. And I find it particularly interesting in Avery's paintings that I have to think about a total shift of the term of abstraction. Even if you see figures there, I think it's an absolutely consequential continuation of the quest of abstraction in painting. And we have spoken a lot about the presence of other, you know, of abstract style, which is very much present also in the contemporary art scene at the moment. And I find it very interesting to think about that, because we see a lot of abstract painting, and I don't see any abstraction in that anymore, and I see much more abstraction in paintings like Avery's, which obviously don't deal with our idea of what an abstract painting is. And yeah, we had long discussions, and I don't want to give a full answer, but just to maybe express that for me this is this very painting that is not denying the presence of let's say of figuration we can walk by and initiate our imagination from, turn something into something much more dealing with the abstract reality we are actually living in than many abstract style painting we are encountering today. And of course I will never ask Avery to talk about other artists, but I was really wanting to ask again what you think about the... Oh, no, I have to add something. I have to add that, of course, when you look at Avery paintings, the pre-figuration of abstract art in the early 20th century is fully referenced also. You know, we think of Cubism, we think of Futurism, we think of all of those styles, but none of those styles really sits down when we look at the paintings. And of course, I really do believe that with the abstraction which was developed at that time, and which we kept first as a revolutionary thought really, and has turned into something we look at as if we still know what it's dealing with, has been totally reversed by the full arrival of the digital world as a lifting us to another idea and to another concept of abstraction. And so I want to finish this with a question Avery might not answer, but do you think there's a change in the concept of abstraction in terms of art?
Imagine pictorial space, and beyond neo-expressionism, I don't really see like isolating abstraction as like a pure, like if you could say like as like a pure form of making art. I don't think necessarily like makes new or valid claims like beyond neo-expressionism.
Like then of course go together and everyone to see in person these paintings. I'd like to close our talk and maybe ask you a couple of words to Beatrix about your next programs at the Stedelijk, if you want, but just really 2 words, and then everyone wants really to go in the rooms to see Avery's paintings and all the other shows. Ho chiesto a Beatrix di raccontarci veramente brevemente i suoi programmi ad Amsterdam, e poi appunto andremo tutti insieme a vedere le mostre.
If I start that, you're not going to see the show, because I'm very excited about the many programs, but I think you're really here to see Avery Singer show. I recommend the homepage www.stedelijk.nl, and I'm happy to later on tell you in person, but I think you should really go see Avery's show now. Yeah, you haven't seen what we have been talking about so far. I thank very much for these fantastic translations.
Thank you.
It's very nice to hear. And thank you, Avery, for the collaboration and for that wonderful show. There's a catalogue in production which is going into print basically tomorrow. So it will be here in about 3 weeks latest. Thank you.